Are you ready to get energized? It is John Tostanoski here for episode 4 of the EG4 Electronics Power Hour. And I have a special guest with me here today, Ms. Kate Schlee of our Compliance Engineering Department. Kate, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are
Awesome. No, I'm great. I am great. I have the better half of the Schlee family with me here. Your husband Eric is one of our trusted colleagues as well here.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, and you found your way into the EG4 Electronics family.
Yes, I did.
That's
in
right.
August.
And you're both in the Compliance Engineering Department.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, he's kind of a solar nerd, so he was really excited when EG4 had an opening. Well, yeah, when EG4 had an opening, and then he was kind of talking about, some of the stuff that the department needed.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I could do that. And so there was a job opening, so I applied, and they decided I could do it. So
yeah, and you can do it. It's so funny, when you first joined the team, I remember walking back and forth to the desks, right? Because, like my desk was kind of at that time, it was across the way from yours. And I remember looking around and I'm like, wait, same last name. Okay.
Yeah.
Just putting 2 and 2 together. And yeah, we're just delighted to have you on the team.
Thank you.
Some of the things that we want to talk about in this week's Power Hour installment, utility requirements, permitting, why compliance is important,
yes.
AHJs, what is an AHJ? I mean, I'm playing a little bit silly. I know what an AHJ is, but we have multiple audiences across the EG4 user group. And some of those audiences are our DIY customers. Some of them are end users. So your homeowner that's going to reach out to one of our certified elite installers to get their equipment installed. And then you have the installers themselves, the professional EPCs and installers that are installing our equipment at a professional high volume level. Then you have our distribution channel, the people that sell our equipment. Our trusted partners in that. A lot of this stuff, these acronyms and just different certifications are really important to the industry. And then outside of that, there's a lot of changes in the utility environment. So I know in last week's podcast, we talked a little bit about how the utility rate structures have changed and how that really has impacted homeowners and, commercial electricity consumers alike. They're really, it's not just price gouging that we're seeing from utility companies. Again, I'm not necessarily always an advocate of against the grid.
Yeah.
I think that we need the utilities to be really good partners with us. It's not just that, they're price gouging. I think there's some of that. I do. I'm going to be hypercritical of them where I see fit. But I think it's just because the demand on the grid and the infrastructure across the United States, as well as other countries, the global infrastructure is really outdated. And there's far too much electricity demand on the grid. But you have the other portion of the utilities that I want to talk about today, which is like how you actually get your project done when you're doing a solar installation, or even if it doesn't have rooftop solar, a battery installation only, or with any of our equipment, anytime you're interconnecting to the utility, and then beyond that, safety protocol and why our equipment is tested to a certain standard. Even if you're not interconnecting and you're doing like an off-grid system, you have to have your equipment tested to a certain standard. So I want to talk about some of those things. Before I get into that, I want to talk about what the compliance team does at EG4 that I personally feel, as working at an installation company previously, I feel this is really special. And that is how the compliance team helps our elite installers. If you're not an elite installer yet, please get on our website. Again, this is for licensed contractors only, but if you are a professional level installer and you've not gotten your certification with EG4 equipment yet, please reach out to us on our website. You click on the home tab and then go to installers, and it says become an EG4 installer. If you're a homeowner looking to get EG4 equipment for their home, we can place you with a certified installer as well. And that's where you would click on the Get EG4 for My Home tab. But what does the compliance team do here at EG4 for our lead installers that is a little bit unique?
Well, when they're trying to get their systems connected, whether it's permitting through AHJs, authorities holding jurisdiction, we will work with them. Sometimes there's additional information that the jurisdiction needs that we supply, some of our test reports and stuff that we don't publish on our website. We can provide that, sometimes interconnecting with the utilities. All the utilities are different, and a lot of our installers, they install with multiple utilities, and so navigating those intricate websites, PG&E is one that their permitting process is quite difficult. And so we try to assist them as much as possible with navigating the way that they list things and how to get through that process.
Yeah, why is it that some, AHJs have gotten and utilities have gotten so difficult with some of this stuff? Did we see that in the past, or how did it change?
I'm fairly new to solar, so I don't really know how significant it was in the past, but I don't know if it's just because there's so many different types of products on the market would be my guess. And, even though you have what we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is the standards that the safety standards the equipment's tested to, you still have a lot of products. So I think that's part of it. I think part of it is a lack of education with some of the utilities and some of the AHJs. They just don't know solar.
Yeah.
And so, I think that they just know certain aspects to look for. And if you give them anything that's not within that little box, they don't really know how to handle it sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree. You're new to solar?
Yeah.
I think I knew that. What were you doing before you were at EG4? I mean, you don't have to name specific names, but you're really good at this stuff.
So thank you. I worked for a building department for a small city in Oregon.
Okay.
So my husband and I were living out of state before we moved back to Texas. And so I dealt somewhat with the solar, but it was on the permitting side. So taking in the permits, processing the permits and stuff.
So that's where your expertise comes in.
With the
you were
permitting.
on the other side of the business, so to speak, in this instance. All right, that makes a lot of sense. So that's where you got your expertise from.
Yes.
You said AHJs, that's authorities holding
jurisdiction.
Authorities holding jurisdiction. That's like a city or a municipality.
Yes. So it's going to be a city, a county, can be the fire department, because especially what we're seeing in California and other places as well, the fire department has a role in the permitting process for solar, because they're concerned, especially when you have batteries involved, they're concerned with fire risk. Sometimes people refer to the utility because sometimes you have cities that are also the governing body for the utility. So.
Yeah, and obviously it makes a lot of sense. Like in California, they're really concerned about fires and for good reason.
Yes.
With that said, like how does our equipment stack up, or what are some of the things that we test for? Like, is it UL 9540 or?
So UL 9540 covers our energy storage systems.
Okay.
So meaning for EG4 products, we test our inverters and batteries together. EG4 branded inverters and batteries. So we do different configurations, and then we can say that set of products together is UL 9540 compliant, and it's a safety standard that is going to let the inspector or the utility or the fire department know that that product is, or those products together are safe to operate together.
So they're safe to operate together, and like the risk of fire is basically just drastically minimized if at all possible. Like a lot of our products have built-in fire arresters and stuff on them.
They do. So the fire testing falls under UL 9540A.
Okay.
Which is as confusing as it is because the numbers are very close.
So you have UL 9540 and then you have UL 9540A?
Yes.
Okay.
So UL 9540 is the energy storage system altogether. So the inverter and battery for EG4. I'm speaking specific to EG4 because other brands do their stuff a little bit different. And then for the batteries themselves, we test them to UL 9540A. And that is thermal runaway. I don't remember. It's a really long description for the standard, but it's thermal runaway and fire propagation. So they're testing to see if that battery, because lithium batteries can go into what they call thermal runaway if there's some type of fault. So if that battery goes into thermal runaway, what gases will be released from the battery? What if the like if it's in a module, so whether it's going to transfer from one cell to another or one module, which for us, typically a module is what we consider our battery. It's got multiple cells inside of it. So, and then they use that testing, and there's not a certification for it. We refer to it as being listed with ETL because that is the test laboratory that tests EG4 equipment.
Okay.
And that is listed because it's a test, not a certification process.
Okay.
So it kind of confuses people because they look for a certification of 9540A, but that's not really the right terminology for that. So
I get it. So it's UL listed.
Yes.
I've heard that term get thrown around.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
And 9540 is a certification, but 9540A is a test procedure that provides information on how the battery is going to react if it's put into certain circumstances.
Okay. And we have that certification for our 18 kPV, 12 kPV, right?
So the 9540?
Yeah.
So the 9540, we have it for our 18 kPV, the 12 kPV, the FlexBoss 21. I think those, we are working on it for a couple of our
newer products.
Okay. And then, but it also they're specific for like inverter battery combinations and they can't be interchanged.
Right. So it's for with our wall mount batteries, right?
Yes. So the 18K, 12K, FlexBoss 21 are all rated with our indoor and all-weather batteries, wall mount batteries.
Yeah, because we have two. We have a all-weather wall mount battery, and then we have the indoor batteries.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the 18K is also UL 9540 certified with the EG4 LLS batteries, the rack mount batteries.
Our server rack batteries?
Yes.
All right.
And the LifePower 4 V2.
Okay.
Server rack battery.
So this stuff all speaks to like the work that goes into making sure that the equipment is safe.
Yes.
Which is important.
Yes.
And truth be told, this stuff sounds boring, but I think for the geeks like me that would be watching, I would want to know this because whether I'm a professional installer, a DIYer, or an end user, safety is paramount, right?
Yes.
And then obviously to the jurisdictions or the AHJs and to the utilities, it seems, is that all of this different testing is done to ensure the robustness, if that's a word, of the product and to ensure that it's safe and ultimately it's compliant, right?
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
And something else that I forgot to mention on the 9540A that also gives us the spacing that we can have between the batteries. So if you have multiple batteries it provides the information so that if your jurisdiction will allow you to have a reduced spacing, because the code calls for 3 feet between the batteries, but a lot of jurisdictions, once you have the 9540A testing, will allow you to reduce that spacing.
Really?
And so right now, I believe it's 6 inches between our all-weather wall mounts and our indoor wall, like when you have multiple.
Yeah, so it allows for reduced spacing. I do know that that is like a little bit of a caveat in some cases, because
Yes.
like some utilities or I should say some jurisdictions, right,
Yes.
are actually not they're not abiding by that.
They're not.
They're basically saying no, you have to have X amount of feet between it, and that's
Yes.
just, is that like an overabundance of caution, or is it just or is it kind of like maybe what you said earlier? There is still a lack of knowledge with a lot of jurisdictions on the equipment, not just our equipment though,
Just in general.
in general, like battery ESS storage systems, inverters, solar equipment.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff is still pretty foreign to them.
It is, yes. And yeah, I don't know whether it's a overabundance of caution or what it is for them. I think it's kind of probably a combination of all of those, some lack of understanding. And it's kind of hit or miss, which is why we try to tell our customers that you need to contact the jurisdiction prior to installation.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to go through permitting, unless you're in a county like where my parents live, where there's no permitting department.
Some places don't have it.
But
right?
that's unusual. And so you need to at least look and make sure that you know what the requirements are, if they're going to allow you to even submit for them to consider whether or not they'll reduce the spacing.
Okay.
Because you don't want to have a job where you have a limited amount of space and you're planning on them being 6 inches apart, and the utility tells you no, or the AHJ tells you no, it has to be 3 feet apart. Well, where you could have maybe put 3 or 4 batteries in one space, you're able to put 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So you need to be aware of what their requirements are.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's actually, interesting, like about how much of, like, let's say the United States has like a permitting requirement for this kind of stuff. Like roughly, is it like what, like 85% is going to require these different standards?
I would say probably. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
But it seems like it's getting more and more like intense. Like even places far out in the country where that never used to be a thing, now all of a sudden it is a thing. Like you have to, your equipment must be tested, it must be safe, and you must follow certain guidelines to install.
And even if you don't have, like, maybe your city or county doesn't have requirements. Like I use my parents as an example. Their county does not have a requirement and they live outside the city limits. So they have no building department per se to oversee what the code requirements would be for that, but they're still connected to the grid. So they still have to go through the requirements for the utility. So if you're going to be installing and you're going to be interconnecting with a utility, whether it's a backup system or you're actually going to be paralleling and trying to sell back, you have to know before you purchase your system and go to have it installed, what are their requirements? And that also, I think, would probably, which I'm not on the design side, but would also help you build out your system because you would know sizing wise.
100%.
So
I think that's actually a really important thing to reflect to a big, member of our audience, or of our, as I call it, our user group, is our do-it-yourself customers. We still serve that community, even though a lot of our business has shifted towards more, our products are still designed to be totally used off grid.
Yeah.
And it is the true whole home backup solution. And there's truly no product like it. Even though we've shifted to, because we've gained so much market share, we've shifted to serving a lot of the mass market as well, where our products are heavily leveraged by professional installers. I think it's important to mention this to our DIY community and give a shout out to them. That's where we came from, but highlight to them, to help them, the way that a solar project actually should be installed. And really, like, so the DIY community, so y'all know how this works. Like when a professional installer goes out there, they are pretty good at some of this stuff, right? At all of it, really. And the first step in the project is basically, obviously it's a signed solar agreement, right? Or,
Yep.
You've got either, whether it's financed or cash, wherever, it's going to be a contractor doing the work for you, right? And they usually don't make any mistakes, but it is getting more complex. But the process, the way it works is, it's, the first thing is you need to do what's called a site survey. And a site survey is basically a series of photos and then a good understanding of the entire scope of the electrical equipment that currently exists on the home. And the photos and measurements that you need to take really pertain to your roof, if you're going to do it on a rooftop, or if you're doing a ground mount system, where will the ground mount go? Yeah. What are my measurements to do trenching out to the ground mount? So on and so forth. What is the main service panel that exists in the home? Where is the meter located? How many breakers are on the main service panel, i.e. how many loads is it servicing? Yep. What is the size of that main breaker panel? What is the amperage rating of it? So on and so forth. And then from there, you collect all of that information, and then you basically start to put together what's called a plan set. Yeah. And the plan set is your actual drawing with all of the different things in there. And when you're putting together your plan set, you have to understand what the AHJ code is looking for. Yes. Because in some cases, they may require a service disconnect, right? Yep. Or some sort of a manual transfer switch, like a 3-way manual transfer switch that's, on, off, on, right? Sometimes we call some of these different things, like a knife switch or whatever. You're going to need to have certain components. Yes. And then once you get that plan set, it has to be kind of like a professional electrical single line diagram, a schematic that then goes to the authorities having jurisdiction, and they need to give it a thumbs up. Yep. And once they give it a thumbs up, so, oh, by the way, if your drawing is not correct, what do? They send it back to you. Yes. Once they give it a thumbs up, only then do you have a permit. Working in parallel, the next step in the process, and usually when you're a higher volume professional installer, you work in parallel, but the next step in the process is technically to basically go get your interconnection agreement. And in some cases, you can submit that prior to installation. Yep. In other cases, you can't even submit it until after it's been fully installed. But on that point, you have to know what the utilities requirements are when you design that system. True. Because a lot of utilities require the knife switch that you're referring to, the disconnect. And it doesn't matter what components, what they're rated to. Some of them require that to be the first thing after the meter, because that's what their linemen know to look for if they have to go and make sure that something is de-energized from the grid, isolated from the grid. So it doesn't matter, whether our stuff is service entrance rated or not. That has to be there, and they won't waver on it in a lot of cases. And we are seeing some of that. Yes. The other thing is, there's a lot of requirements that are coming out that have not been seen before. And it's just something that you have to make adjustments to. And I'm an active member on a lot of the EG4 user forums and stuff like that. And one of the most common questions that I'm seeing nowadays is related to the process of doing the project, not like the process of getting to start doing the project, all of the paperwork and all that stuff. And people are really struggling with it because of the amount of requirements that are coming along. And one thing that we do want to, say is like, if you're a DIY customer and you're working with a distributor, let's say one of our valued distribution partners like Current Connected or Signature Solar, typically they have a pretty skilled team to help you. Yeah. Our team is more designed to help the professional installation community, but we do have the most amazing distribution partners out there that will help the do-it-yourself user group to help you get your job going. Outside of that, once you finally get your plan set approved, you're still not ready. Like you have to get basically the notice to proceed, right, from all parties saying, okay, your plan set is done. Now in many cases the utility and the jurisdiction both have to say, all right, you're good to go. Now you can finally install it. Once it gets installed, then it has to come out and be inspected. It depends on where you are. In some cases, the city is going to inspect it, and then the utility, or nobody might inspect it. In some cases, just the utility will inspect it, not the city. And in other cases, just the city will inspect it, not the utility.
And you forgot about the fire department.
And then in some cases, the fire department wants to inspect it. So there's a lot of different people that are involved in the process now, and it can get really complex.
And some cities are requiring a master electrician. If for like someone who's installing themselves, we actually have a coworker that where he lives in the Dallas area, they required, since he installed it himself and was not a licensed electrician, they wanted a master electrician to come out and inspect the system before they would come and sign off on it.
Yep.
So
so we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of that in places that are local to us, places in Texas that, everyone thinks of Texas as this Wild West red state, but the reality is, just because of, I guess, the political backdrop of Texas, it doesn't change the requirements for safety.
No.
I think that's part of the reason why a lot more people, again, going back to our highly valuable distribution partners, a lot of do-it-yourself customers have leaned on our distribution partners who are awesome partners, and they subsequently lean on us to help them out as well too.
Yeah.
But outside of that, some people have said, you know what, I just need to go to a professional installer and get it done. And that's great too. Either way, I think what is important is that we as a team here at EG4 are invested in putting in the work to make sure that from a product perspective and then from an overall EG4 ecosystem perspective, we're making sure that we have the groundwork laid out so that people can get this installed, even if it's eventually. And get it going. And then I, not to mention the last step in that process is like PTO, permission to operate. That's when your system finally gets turned on. There's a lot of people that nowadays want to touch this system before they'll actually let you turn it on. And even if you're off grid, you might require PTO, right? Because if you're leveraging grid assist, if you're not selling back, there might be an instance where they want to see that stuff. So doing it the right way is really important, but I think it's more of like a fret not thing. Like, don't fear, because we do have your back. We did come from that off-grid DIY space where we're advocates for people to do it themselves. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, that's cool. We've got professional installers that leverage our equipment on a daily basis. They're certified experts, and you can go that route as well. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, or flipping the knife switch. What is, and I've got, the audience knows, like, John's looking at his book here. I've got good talking points, right? So I don't get off track. What is UL 1741?
So UL 1741 is the test safety standard that we use for inverters. So, and there's UL 1741, and then there's UL 1741 SA and SB. So there's subparts to that one, and they're all kind of related. And SA and SB have to do with the interaction with the grid. And 1741 is like the safety standards for the inverter.
Okay, how deeply do we want to boil the ocean on that stuff? Probably not.
No.
It could get really hairy.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's good to know that our equipment is tested to that standard, or it's listed, right?
So it is listed, but those are certifications.
Okay.
So we do have certifications.
All right, so we're certified?
We are for UL 1741.
I love it.
So our website has section that covers the certifications for each. So if you go to the product pages on our website, They do have a lot of information. It does show the certifications that each product. So for the inverters, the UL 1741, the Grid Boss is also UL 1741,
Okay.
but not. It doesn't have as extensive of UL 1741 testing for it because it's not actually an inverter. So we have other testing
I got you.
parameters
See,
that.
I knew you were going to put a plug in there.
Yes.
We will.
Whitney has been working on our website and she's doing a phenomenal job.
Awesome.
And
Shout out to Whitney. We will make you a sales and branding person one day.
Oh, please
See,
no.
you're plugging it already. I love it.
But our product pages do have a lot more information, and it does have the certificates, and the UL 9540A is a test verification of conformity, so that is also on there.
Okay.
You can also click on whether you're on our inverter pages or our battery pages. If they have a 9540 with any of our other equipment, there is a tab where you can go on and you can see which configurations.
Okay.
So, and you can get those certificates.
Well, that's super valuable.
Yes.
No, that's good. I guess with with your experience here, there are some common themes that we've seen across some of the utilities in terms of requirements.
Mm-hmm.
One of which is, I guess there's been like a max kilowatt hour storage limitation in a lot of areas.
Yes.
What are we seeing there?
You mean like limitations?
Yeah.
I believe it's usually like 30 to 60 kilowatts.
Okay.
And
I know like in Dallas proper, it was like 85 kilowatt hours or something. Why is it that we're seeing these limitations?
I don't know if it's that the utilities don't want people selling back too much, or if
they don't want them storing too much.
Maybe. I'm not sure. I could theorize.
I personally feel, I mean, I think it's okay to pontificate. I personally feel like in some cases, the utilities have a good intention, but that's not been my experience. I mean, the reason why I'm here at EG4 is because of our mission statement that it's energy generation for everyone. And obviously our trusted leaders, especially our CEO and founder, James Showalter, he comes from a very humble background. It's an incredibly humble story. And through his story, he set out to make, basically energy independence affordable and accessible to everyone. Without sacrificing quality whatsoever. So what we do is deliver a high value product and allow people to really gain their energy independence. But to me, it feels like the utilities and these big conglomerates that own those utilities, right? Because without naming names, there are some utilities out west that are owned by some of the richest people in the world.
Yeah.
This is a fact.
I know. And I know who
guys, look it up. Guys and gals, look it up. This is a fact. And I personally think it's beyond sketchy. And to see that they're trying to limit our storage capacity to be independent is really troubling. And I think it's something that, like, there's different rights, solar rights and advocacy organizations like SEIA. We all need to be CalSA in California. If we're a solar advocate, if we're a consumer, a DIY person, whatever it is, we need to be supporting these groups because I'm personally seeing like some frightening things for these large conglomerates to try and put the package over us, or whatever you want to call it, to cover all this up and make it go away, because we are making an impact and we are giving people the capability to be fully energy independent without being subject to the grid. And I want more of that. That's what our founder's mission is. That's what our mission is at EG4. But it's concerning to see. What is interesting though, and I think there's a silver lining, is that we found some workarounds. Like in some areas, they may put a kilowatt hour storage cap on like your ESS system. But guess what? You can have multiple ESSs installed on one house.
Yes.
Maybe I'm like totally messing up the industry for everyone, but I hope not. But that is something that you can do. So it's kind of like a fear not thing. Like
Yep.
in some areas, and I know this to be a fact, like, man, I'm shouting out like the city that I don't live in Dallas proper anyways. It's because of the kilowatt hour storage limit. I moved from Dallas. But you know, like in the city of Dallas, it is specifically stated in their literature though, it's kilowatt hour cap per ESS.
Okay.
Not necessarily per property, if you will. So you can have multiple ESSs and you can still have, you know, 80, you know, 160, whatever kilowatt hours of storage capacity on your, you know, on your domain, on your property. And I think that's like part of the beauty of our equipment is that you can have such a high power output and such deep storage capacity.
Yes.
Right? Because we're UL rated on one inverter for how many wall mount batteries?
I believe 6.
6 batteries on one inverter, right? So that's a massive amount of storage.
Yes.
And I believe that people should have that if they want it. What's cool is that, you know, you can kind of get around that in a lot of cases. Not every case.
No.
So we always encourage the audience, check with your local authorities holding or authorities having jurisdiction.
Yep.
But in some cases, you'll find that you can install as much as you want.
And on that, sometimes people are wanting to use rebate programs, and some of those rebate programs limit.
Yeah, that's a
so
great
that's
point.
another thing. That's another factor to throw in there. Is that if you're wanting to do some of the battery rebate programs, you also have to know what their, you know, limitations are, if any.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally get it. It's always good to talk to some experts and make sure you're getting the right information.
Yeah.
You know,
and some states and some area like utility companies or regions, I think the Northeast, they have information. I don't know if it's through the state or if it's a third party, but there are, I know, and I couldn't tell you which utility area it was, but you can see like what the rebate programs are in that area and associated with different utility companies and stuff.
Yep.
So usually you can do a Google search and kind of get an idea of what might be available in your area.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different programs out there that are advantageous to the homeowner to add storage to their home. Definitely take a look at those programs. You know, stuff like a lot of EG4 equipment is installed on SGIP qualifying homes, I guess you would say. That's out in California.
Don't ask me what it stands for because I don't remember.
I forget as well, but the reason why people look to our equipment for that program, because I don't know if this is true, but I heard from one of our customers that like EG4 was the #1 SGIP installed battery and inverter solution.
Nice.
By megawatt storage capacity, like by total like megawatts installed. Which I don't know exactly what the number was, but he had heard it at one of the CALSA meetings or something.
Nice.
And the reason why is just because we do have these awesome products that have a deeper storage set with more power output than what you would normally find. So it's interesting stuff. You know, one other common thing, a theme I'm seeing across the utility companies is the PV production meter. What's that all about? And where does that fit in? So give me this scenario on that.
So the PV production meter is everyone I've seen that utility companies are requiring their AC meters, which automatically causes a problem when you're dealing with solar because, you know, it comes from the solar panels as DC power and we convert it into AC in our inverters. And so they're wanting to measure depending on how they phrase it, sometimes they're telling you that they want to know the total energy that the solar panels are producing, which I kind of have an issue with, because if it's powering my house and my batteries, then why does it matter how much I'm producing? Really, what they should want to know is how much I'm sending back to the grid.
Isn't that your power anyways?
I thought so, or,
Yeah.
but they're wanting to know some of them say the total PV production, which with the way our systems are, like I said, we take the DC power from the solar panels, and it can go into our inverter as DC and then get converted and then distributed however need. DC to the batteries, AC to the house, AC to the grid. And they're wanting to know not just how much, some of them, not just how much we're sending back to the grid, but what the total PV production is. But with an AC meter, that complicates the whole system, because then, and I'm not going to go into design stuff because that's not really my purview, but you would have to convert that power coming from the panels before it ever goes into the inverter to even be able to measure that, to tell them that. And so, and then if you had like, multiple inverters, it depends some ways that they're requiring it. You would have to have a PV meter for each, associated with each inverter, or some people have an existing system and a new system.
Yeah.
And so it can get very complicated, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, it sounds complicated. Right now my brain is like, personally, I mean, I know a little bit about it. I'm a grid skeptic.
Yeah. See, you're in a good place coming to Texas.
Yeah, I'm a grid skeptic. Yeah, we do have some like pretty skeptical people in Texas. Maybe not. I live in the city, like not in the city, but I live in, I live out in the DFW area,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it's kind of hard to be a maybe like an extreme prepper.
Yeah.
But you go out into the countryside, and Texas has got a lot of beautiful country. There are some people that are skeptical about just about everything, where their food comes from, their water source, and certainly their electricity. I'm skeptical because I'm a natural grid skeptic because of what the utility companies, not to keep punching them. Look, I want them to be really good partners of ours, because I think there is a place for that. And we're willing, utility companies, if you're listening, we're willing to work with you. We want to be good partners.
Well, and the people that work at them that we've dealt with, they've all been really
fantastic.
They've been fantastic. They've been reasonable people. It's not them that are making the decision, though. It's whoever's making the policies much higher.
Yeah.
And so they're, I mean, we've talked with them and they understand where we're coming from, but unfortunately their hands are tied because
100%.
of the policies.
Yeah, but like I was saying, with me being a grid skeptic, I feel like they want to measure everything.
Yep.
Right? Because they want to know what you're sending back, what you're producing, because maybe they want to monetize it in the future. Look, I'm being totally hypothetical there. Like, I'm just thinking out loud, but I think they're trying to monetize it. My solution to that is don't do wimpy solar.
Yeah.
Right? And the good thing about EG4 is we don't make wimpy solar. We don't make, like, our product is not, you can install it without a battery.
Yeah.
And that's cool. If you want to do that, you don't have to have an EG4 battery on your, on your FlexBoss 21 inverter or whatever, right? You don't have to do that. You can add a battery later if you're still in an area with a really good net metering arrangement.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I personally am like, storage is the way. Because guess what? If I have ESS battery storage, I can put myself in a position where nothing goes back to the grid. And I'm only utilizing the grid as like backup if I really need it even. Like that grid, the grid, that's my backup. Like I use that for, when I'm throwing a party and I just need to recharge my batteries. But guess what?
Yeah.
I have enough storage and I have PV and all that stuff, and I can I can monitor everything on my app. I can be cognizant of my system.
Yep.
And guess what? When the grid goes down, I'm safe. My family is safe. Like,
Yeah.
that's the more of the type of person that I am.
Yeah. So when are you going to move out of the Dallas area?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's another person in my house that I have to convince otherwise, but so it's like I'm not married yet, right? But we're
Soon.
Yeah, I know, next month. So we're getting married next month, May 2nd. If there's a bunch of random EG4 fans, which I'm glad that we have such an awesome fan base. If you guys randomly show up, that's cool. Would love to have you there. It is an open bar. So there's going to be a bunch of people that are like, is John the EG4 guy there? But ultimately, I think there's a lot of like crazy things that are going on with utilities, with authorities having jurisdictions. But we at EG4 have a way to work with our end users ultimately to make sure that everything does get installed, it gets installed properly. And oh, by the way, our equipment is compliant. It's engineered to a specific specification to ensure that you ultimately are safe. And I think that's the most important thing. What is the grid sellback limitation letter? What's that all about?
So some utilities require you to limit the amount that you can actually send back to the grid. So it's just a simple letter that I think you can get it on our website or you can contact our support team. And they can send it to you and you just fill out some utilities, they do some type of study. I don't know the details of it. I think Encore does like a study and they tell you here's the maximum that you can sell back to the grid. And so then if you have one inverter, you set it to that maximum kilowatt rating. Or if you have multiple inverters, you split it between that.
And that's the max continuous sellback, right?
I believe so, but I don't know all of the specifics of it.
I'd be interested to know. Like, I actually,
I think you're right, because I think there's sometimes when you're gonna increase that a little bit, but I believe you're.
Yeah, I personally, from my understanding, it actually has to do with like a little bit of the instability of the grid.
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't want you sending too much power back to the grid because
the grid can't handle it.
Yeah, it may not be able to handle it, which all the more reason you're going to do our equipment, get the batteries as well.
Yep.
We will make sure that we treat you right.
Yep.
So this grid sellback limitation letter for our audience that's listening and watching, if you're one of our elite installers, you can reach out directly to your account manager and they have that letter. They can provide it for you and walk you through the process to get that handled. And we can actually basically lock out the inverter.
Yep.
And we basically engineering sign off on it for you so that it's
actually support. So
it's support that
we worked with support, compliance worked with support to get that letter where it works for most utilities. So we kind of based it off of a meeting with Encore.
Okay.
And then we haven't had any utilities that didn't accept it so far.
Okay.
So, and then the support team, because I don't actually have access to go in the back end of an inverter and change the settings. I can view it, but I don't, and that's fine because they're the ones that do that on a regular basis. So they know how to navigate that system. And so they can go in and they can set that, lock it, and then they will sign that letter and send it back to either the installer, customer, utility, wherever they need to send it to.
Perfect. All right. I don't want to set the wrong precedent.
Nope.
But yeah, if you're one of our installers, professional installers, you can reach out to your account manager and they will be able to provide that letter for you and set that whole process up.
Yep.
So that it complies with your with the utility that you're installing in. It's a super simple process.
Yes, you will need to know the serial number of the inverters because that's how they will log into the inverters.
Yep.
And they'll have to be online.
Yes.
When you go to when they need to do that.
Yep. And that's something that we typically handle. They send us the information ahead of time, and then when you're commissioning, you can call in and we'll help you with it.
Yep.
And then obviously, if you're working with one of our distribution partners, because you're kind of doing it yourself, you've got that option. Like if you're, let's say, working with Signature Solar, they can kind of do the same thing.
Or do
they work through us?
I think they still go through us.
Okay.
I think they might have access to change the setting, but they still have us sign the letters.
Okay.
So our guys go in and at least verify if the setting was already changed.
Probably the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll help you out with that. We're eager to obviously serve our customers in the best way that we can. The sellback limit letter, how does that differ from the derate letter?
So the derate letter is like permanently limiting the amount of output that the inverter can send to the grid.
Okay, so that's like taking, like, for example, on a FlexBoss 21, the max continuous output is like 16 kilowatt, right? That's basically taking a 16 down to a 10 and locking it at that.
Yes.
And the reason why we would do that is kind of why? Is that like utility requirements?
I believe so.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I think there are some
cases,
jurisdictions that require that limitation, and then I think it's usually the utilities.
Okay.
So we don't see that as often. So usually if someone says they want a derate, I make sure we get clarification as to whether they're meaning the sellback limitation or the actual derating of the inverter.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? I think, the fact that we can do that on our equipment is really nice, because if you're basically working with equipment that doesn't have that capability, it can really limit your options, and it can impact your decision making on what kind of inverter and batteries you want to go with, and inverter and battery sizing, right? Because obviously you want to have the correct ratio. And also, as well as to service the loads on the main service panel.
Yep.
The fact that you can do that with our equipment and lock it out is a huge value add.
Yeah.
It's massively beneficial. I guess, I think kind of the last thing I want to touch on is really what is the future for OEMs. And for those of you that don't know, an OEM is an original equipment manufacturer. So, we at EG4 are a manufacturer. What is the future of like, solar, battery, and inverter, ESS, true energy independence manufacturing OEMs like ourselves? What is the future for us in working with AHJs? And then what does the future relationship look like with installers, working with AHJs and utilities? What do you think is going to happen moving forward?
Well, I think as more of these systems get installed, the AHJs and the utilities are going to be forced to gain a better understanding of it. I don't see how they wouldn't. Just, the exposure, the different types, they're going to have to come up to speed because it's not going away. And the way that our grid, especially in the United States, is, it is outdated, and there's a lot of, it has not been properly kept up. It has not been improved. You see more grid outages. If it gets cold in Texas, you have, power outages. Or if you have, I think Oklahoma's on fire because of lines getting, going down and causing fires. And, so
it's really catastrophic.
It is. When we lived in Oregon, we almost got burned out of our house because of the power lines. The power lines caused a fire because of high winds, and we almost lost our house. So, that's not a regional thing anymore. Used to, California's on fire. Okay. Like, that didn't affect us in Texas. Now it's all over the place. So,
Yeah.
and I think that, and look at North Carolina when they got hit by the hurricane, their natural disasters, between that, the grid not being kept up, I think that they're going to have to learn more and educate themselves, and because it's not going away.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's not regional anymore.
No.
It's nationwide, it's
Mhm.
worldwide.
Yeah, we went to Scotland and there were solar panels on the tops of like apartments, and
Yeah.
you think Scotland, like how many months out of the year is it cloudy there? But they still had solar panels.
Solar works, right?
Yep. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah, I think, there's just the fires in California, the Palisades fire, that was so impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like a few months ago, right? Now we're
Yep.
seeing all these other wildfires,
Mm-hmm.
some of them being started by power lines and
Yep.
stuff like that. It speaks to the fragility, the fragile
Yes.
nature of the grid. The North Carolina thing is so devastating still,
Yes.
that people in that area, which, let's be very honest, heavily disenfranchised communities there.
Oh, absolutely.
Extremely disenfranchised. At the end of the day, they still don't have power.
Yeah.
What's cool is, like, we have some of our installation partners that used EG4 products to do like a light commercial application out there for the Ovanova.
Yeah.
It's okay to shout out
Yeah.
some of our partners, right? They did a small grocery store there.
That is awesome.
That, like, I don't know the whole story, but I think it like lost power, right? And basically you did not have like a food supply for the area.
Yeah.
And they provided like truly sustainable, totally independent power source with
That's
like
awesome.
18 inverters, a ton of inverters, ton of batteries. You kind of need this stuff now.
Yep.
And we are, to go back to the original point, like, we're on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
It's the utilities that need to play catch up.
Yeah.
So I do think as we continue to innovate and our competitors continue to innovate, I think EG4 will continue to be on the cutting edge and the utilities will be playing catch up.
Yeah.
But hopefully once they can catch up with us and they can start to leverage us and we can actually work as partners, it will be a better thing. And to your point, like, the people at the utilities have been great to us.
Yeah.
We have a good relationship with a lot of specific people at different utilities across the country.
Yep.
And we want to continue to leverage those partnerships and those relationships.
Agreed.
Well, Kate, any additional thoughts?
Check out our website for the product pages.
That's right.
Make sure that you contact your jurisdiction or utility before you try to install solar.
That's right. Make sure
it makes my job much easier.
Make sure you contact the local utility, the jurisdiction, and then probably the fire department as well.
Yep.
You get a thumbs up from those people, you're probably good.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having
Episode 4 of Power Hour. It's been a good one.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later. Always remember, power more with EG4, energy generation for everyone.